hey, I'm strummerdood or mad or whatever. I don't know. So this author, David Foster Wallace, had read like 20 pages of his book, and in it he said introspection with television's a little bit tough since it's a one-way screen mirroring our daily lives that doesn't turn around and judge us. But maybe video games are a little bit different with their interactivity, especially with Davey Wreden's follow-up to the Stanley Parable, The Beginner's Guide. In The Beginner's Guide, Davey invites us to explore a collection of games developed by a person named Coda.
Is because I find his games powerful and interesting, and I'd like this collection to reach him.
The player naturally joins their tour guide in picking apart the brain space of Coda. Why does the player slow down as they ascend a staircase to an open door? What do all the prisons represent? Why is he obsessed with lampposts? Is the signature 3 dots an homage to Splinter Cell? All puzzle pieces you and Davey try to fit together.
I have no idea what he was thinking, but what's clear is that after making this, something lodges itself in his brain.
Much of this revolves around a clever door puzzle continuously deployed by Coda. Davey identifies the puzzle as a metaphor, a bookend to a period in Coda's life. In walking into a dark alcove and looking back to flip a switch for the door ahead, we're entering a quiet space and taking time to reflect on what came before as we prepare to move forward. The name Coda itself fits this metaphor. In music annotation, this particular symbol is initially passed over. It's only after we repeat a previous section that we follow the Coda symbol to a concluding section of the piece. As the story progresses, the dark space takes on a more sinister connotation. The puzzle involves an inherent leap of faith as we're closing a door behind us, and in the end, we're betrayed when the door has no switch and no solution. We find ourselves where we found Coda during so many of their prison games, stuck in it for an indeterminable amount of time with no feasible way out. During the first of these prison games, we come upon a set of talking heads. They ask for the solution to the door puzzle, but our limited dialogue choices constrain us from giving the correct solution. But when we offer the answer to a second set of mannequins, they say it doesn't very much matter since they find the dark space far more interesting. And given their propensity for prison games, so too does Coda find the Insterces fascinating, both as a positive place of reflection and an unending prison sentence. For Davey, the most patent illustration of the dark space between doors is the house cleaning chapter.
To me, this environment is meant to represent Coda's puzzle, with the 2 doors on either side and a dark transitional space between.
It's a comforting, warm space where we basically get our mind and consciousness into order. As the talking head says, a house is a lot like one soul. You take care of it, and it takes care of you. Coda originally intended for the gameplay to infinitely loop, but in searching for a solution to Coda's problems, Davey cuts the episode short and hurries us along to the next few games, which display a more distressing dark space. Labored with writer's block, Coda beats his head against the wall during the island chapter. After the tried and true door puzzles prove fruitless in kickstarting his creative engine, he begins spitting out half-hearted truisms. Walls seem to be breaking down, but only to reveal a sobbing woman in a prison cell. Coda wants answers, but in forcing them, they simply retreat further into themselves. During the final chapter, Coda and Davey begin to converge, as we learn that Davey not only showed Coda's work off to other people, but has tampered with the original games. The individual titles were the brainchild of the unfettered Coda, but the collection and repurposing of them more so illustrate Davey's plight within himself. The entirety of the Beginner's Guide is a section of Davey's dark space. It's someone lost looking back at work that inspired him so as to find a magic switch hidden beneath the surface. But he finds he can't simply populate the levels with lampposts, arbitrary endpoints to sections of his life, and expect to find some profound revelatory key to life. Though it's not necessary for this theory to work, I do believe Coda represents Davey before the release of the Stanley Parable. He made art for himself, maybe unconsciously slipping in little bits and pieces to hook a larger audience, until boom, the Stanley Parable blows up and people like me shower him with praise. And this, in a way, changes him, or rather how he sees the world for himself. With a simple vignette of walking backward into an uncertain fate, we get the idea of looking back in time to reveal something about the future, to find a key or underlying thread to everything. What he finds instead is Coda, a completely different person he no longer understands. Before the release of the Beginner's Guide, Davey gave a talk to a university where he explained the distress that followed the release of the Stanley Parable. He craved external validation. As he mentions in the Beginner's Guide, Davey characterizes his craven need for validation as a contract, the thing that drives him.
I wanted to be made complete through the validation of someone else.
Around the time the Stanley Parable was receiving Game of the Year nominations left and right, Davey posted about the experience and even authored a short comic to illustrate how he felt. He said he wanted something he could hold out in front of him and say, "This is what I'm experiencing." I think the Beginner's Guide serves this purpose as well, but it does so by making us feel invasive of Coda's personal life. Unlike a television show, it feels like we're meddling with something we're not supposed to. The late game twist places us in Davy's mindset of looking inward instead of outward. It puts up a mirror to the player, but it's not accusatory. It's not deriding the player for trying to understand Coda. It's more so showing Coda's and Davy Reedon's dark spaces and asking us to realize our own flaws. As the narrator, Davy may seem like the visage of perfection throughout the game, but he actually possesses the same insecurities as everyone else. Here's the thing though, we won't find a solution to these problems in the beginner's guide, just as Davy didn't find a magical switch in Coda's work. He remains in the dark space at the conclusion of the game, looking out towards a seemingly unending labyrinth. In discussing such a solution, Davy said he can only give his own story, as the key is entirely personal. But he does say the solution requires patience, a matter of house cleaning to get your head straight, a before and after.
I realize that I have no way of proving this to you, so you kind of just have to take my word for it, but it's the oldest trick in the book. It's encoded into our collective mythology in broad, silly truisms like, free your mind and the rest will follow, which of course we all ignore because who has any idea how to just free your mind, as though it were that simple. But I will suggest to you today that freedom of mind is a result of nothing other than just asking this question over and over and over. What is the deeper purpose?
David Foster Wallace deemed it different forms of worship, our default settings, implying that true freedom derives from awareness of the real and essential in order to be good to those around us as well as ourselves. The best realization in the beginner's guide takes place during the chapter where Coda continuously reiterates on a modern prison with a subterranean connection to the bottom of a well. Coda can't quite create a satisfying game out of these pieces. He tries to build in an open sesame solution but doesn't provide the necessary assets. He creates an unending furniture maze and platformer section, but he just can't think his way out of the conundrum, just like we can't escape the prison. But then Coda hits on something. The player starts outside the prison sometime after escaping, and we have no idea why. When we get on the phone to our past selves, all we can offer is the knowledge that with some patience and self-discovery, we'll one day escape our own dark space.